Welcome friends to lesson 4 of unit 3 and this is on international environment. The learning outcomes for this lesson would be we'll talk about globalization and then we'll touch upon global institutions, although we are going to discuss in detail these global institutions which would be in lesson 5. We'll look at different dimensions of globalization and then we'll have your input and let's discuss in detail whether globalization is good or bad. So let us start with the first thing. So this is something which is happening all over the globe. This is some people have come and they, they are from a different country and they have come to a second country which is not their resident country, and they're asking that there was an information desk which is supposed to be here, and the reply is that it has been relocated to China. So that is the effect of globalization as on today. So things have changed a lot. So let's talk about emergence of globalization, because in the international environment, globalization has really changed the business scene. When we say globalization, what does that mean? So globalization is nothing but where we eliminate the trade barriers and also elimination of communication and cultural exchange limitations. So in a way, we call it as one world. With the emergence of globalization, we try to promote inherent wealth amongst all the countries in the world. So, basic philosophy of globalization is that the wealth should be well distributed across the countries through elimination of trade barriers and also any other limitations that exist. So when we talk about globalization, so in terms of technology, in terms of multinational companies, in terms of tariffs, in terms of supply chain or the transport, in terms of mobility of labor, and in terms of capital, which is in terms of foreign direct investment in other countries. So globalization has brought all these 6 parameters into the global arena. Although this diagram is small, but this will explain as to how the things have changed, how the world has become more globalized. So you have these 5 different stages. To start with, we started with the age of discovery, and then globalization 1.0, globalization 2.0, globalization 3.0, and where we are is the globalization 4.0, which is more in terms of the digital world. And then if you look at the different countries who have benefited, and also in terms of the GDP through the globalization, how it has increased, right? So if you look at the globalization 4, it is China and US which is really getting benefit out of it. And if you look at globalization 3, it was USA through the different innovations and through the technology route, they were able to rule the whole world. So initially, if I look, Europe uh, was able to enhance their GDP through globalization, and then over the period, it is the whole world. And finally, if you look at globalization 4, China has really uh, been able to leverage through globalization their GDP. Now, when we talk about globalization, there has to be global institutions which are able to monitor and streamline the globalization, so that it is not just set of countries which try to make advantage or take advantage of the globalization. So these could be some regional bodies which are a consortium of few countries, or maybe within the continent, or maybe for the whole world. Like if we talk of World Trade Organization, if we talk of International Monetary Fund, IMF, if we talk of World Bank, and if we talk of United Nations. Similarly, the first one which came was General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. So we'll be discussing in detail in the next lesson the role of these global institutions. But if you look at this diagram, this talks about that the financial markets or technology or supply chains or finance or health or social networking or trade, so or the global standards or Indian standards organization. So all these have come up as the global institutions to make the countries go in one direction, so that we can call as one world. So we'll go into the details of these global institutions, but these institutions are needed to help manage, regulate, and police the global marketplace, because scenario is global now, not local. Also, to promote the establishment of multinational treaties. We were talking about the tech giants. Now, who will tame these tech giants? So, they have even grown bigger than these global institutions, who are able to police these big giants. So something will come out of that. So we'll go into the details later on in the next lesson. If we talk about the most globalized countries, so just to have a glimpse at the world scenario, so Europe is the biggest one, where most of the countries have really gone global. When I say global, so it is in terms of economic factors, social factors, and political factors. So this index which you are seeing, 91.30 for Ireland. So if I look at the whole scenario, it is EU which comes first, and then Singapore is also very globalized, and then Canada because of immigration, that is the people moving there. So these are the most globalized countries. You don't see Canada or sorry India in these countries, top 15 globalized nations. Uh, at the same time, if we look at the GDP, right? So if we look at the GDP, so if you look at Europe, so the GDP, if on an average, is more than, I would say, 1 trillion on an average. But if I look at the country-wise GDP, that is the gross domestic product, in 2017. So US is at 19.39 trillion, which is almost around 25% of the global economy. That is one fourth of the global economy is with US. And the second comes China, which is at 12.24. And then you have Japan, and then you have India, not India, then you have Germany, and then you can talk of India, but UK's and India is almost around 3.3%. So this is how the world economy works. But because of globalization, these countries like United States, China, and Germany, the Europe, UK, and Russia, all these countries have benefited out of that in terms of their GDP. If we look at the various dimensions of globalization, globalization has really influenced the culture, the society, the politics, which has gone more global, the economy, and the environment. So, if I talk of the equality, inequality, so it has increased both equality and inequality in terms of communication, recognition, your trade wars, outsourcing, brands, exploitation, growth, poverty, environment, monopoly power, capitalism, culture, free trade, technology, uh, and as I say, one word, so the world has really shrunk. The terrorism, which has gone global from localized one, and the accountability. Even the poverty because of globalization, the growth. So, all these things are the different dimensions of globalization. Now, towards the end, I would like to have your views, your idea about whether globalization is good or bad, as I had been using this term, one word, exploring the globalization. So, in as per you, is globalization making the world better or worse? So, what do you think? I want your inputs, your views. What do you think? You can type in the chat box, and if you have gathered your views, so you can express yourself, and then we'll try to summarize the things. I hope you have your answers, your views on this. But if you ask me, I would say globalization under three categories I would like to discuss. One is economy, one is politics, and one is culture. So it has affected both in a good way as well as in a bad way. But it has really influenced all the three spheres in terms of economy, if we talk. So if I look at the MNCs in 1990s, there were 7,000 multinational corporations. But as on today, there are more than 65,000. So huge increase. So the economy has really, so the companies have really gone global instead of just working within their country. They have gone really global. If we talk of politics, it has really affected because everything has become global now. So there is climate change, which is a global thing, terrorism, which has gone global, and COVID-19, which is pandemic. We call it pandemic because it has affected the whole world. So even elections in one country uh, are influenced by uh, the factors which are outside that country. So it has really affected the politics in a big way. If we talk of culture, so our cultural habits, our entire culture has been changed. So today people they go for MACDs, whether they are in one part of the globe or the other part, or maybe two extreme continents. They have either traveling or working or living. So globalization has really made the things very standardized. So people are moving towards more of the global news. So entertainment, media, anything you name it. So it has affected and has become part of the culture. So the culture has more become global in nature. So question is who wins with globalization? So if I look at the world as a whole, countries like India, Korea, Indonesia, China, Brazil, so because of low wages, uh, they are able to produce cheap products which has given them global success. So as a result, these countries also benefit because the unemployment rate goes down and the GDP is enhanced because of that. But on the other side, the bad effect is that if we look at the African countries, so there the destruction of local production facilities almost gone because they are unable to compete, and there is not much direct investment, and so their what do you call inflation rate has gone up and their currency has really devalued. So both there are winners, there are losers in the road to the globalization. If I have to summarize, so I would say we had discussed about globalization, how what globalization is, and how it is affecting the business environment, global institutions, dimensions of globalization, and whether globalization is good or bad. There is a small quiz which is always there at the end of the lesson. Please type in your answers in the chat box. Question number one is, which is the most globalized nation in the world? Question number two, which is Asia's highest GDP country? And whether the tariffs go up or down with globalization. So if you have typed in or written your answers, you can compare the correct answers. Most globalization nation is Ireland. Asian highest GDP country is China, and tariffs go down with globalization. Feel free to write to me if you have any queries, any questions. And if you want to go for some further reading, I recommend this article from Harvard Business Review, which is about state of globalization. So, and what it means for strategists. So, thank you very much for being such good audience. See you next time with the next lesson. Enjoy your life. Have a good time. Bye for now. Shabak hai.